Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Jaramillo and we're going to take a look at our DMA week 5, day 1. It's a Monday. So we're going to take a look at our table here, and for our table they want us to, this is called an input-output table. So this is our input, which would be one of our addends. So if we were going to write this as an addition sentence, we would say 50. And to that 50, we're going to add 34. So basically, this is our other addend of our addition sentence. And this would be our sum, or in this case, we call it the output. So we're going to take the 50, 34, not 35. That won't give us the right sum. We add 50, and we add 3 more 10s, which would make your 80, and then you have 4 ones in your ones place. So 84 would be your sum. To that 20, we're going to add 30 more. So when you add 30, you get 50. And you have 4 added on to that 50 to make 54. So now we're going to take 0 and we're going to add 34 to that 0. So if I don't have any objects and I want to add 34 more, it's just going to be the 34 objects that you just added in from the 0. And when we look at 30 and we add another 30, that's 60, and 4 more, there are here, is going to take those 60 and add 4 more to make 64. So now, if we look at our next problem, it says, write the fraction that is represented by this rectangle. So remember, means to break apart. And remember, we also are thinking about our whole numbers. Our whole numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and all the numbers that are whole. Now, what happens when we break apart those whole numbers? We get fractions. So if we were to say, oh, this is one whole rectangle. However, I have taken that one whole rectangle and I have cut it apart into 3 equal pieces, or 3 equal parts. So I have 1/3 pieces of this whole rectangle. So actually I can represent that here. Maybe you can see that easier. So 1/3, this is one of the 3 pieces. This is also one of those 3 pieces, and this is one of those 3 pieces. Now, I know that my denominator tells us how many parts are in the whole. And my numerator is going to tell me how many of those parts, and in this case, how many of those parts are shaded parts. So are counted parts, however many there are. So if I were going to say unshaded, I would say I have 1, 2 of the 3 parts. So it could be 2/3. So in this case, we're doing shaded, so it's going to be 1 of the 3 parts. On a number line, we're representing this one whole rectangle in between 0 and 1. So we're pretending, or I guess we're not pretending, we're actually doing it, that if this was 0 and this was 1, this is my one whole rectangle being represented or shown on a number line. And I could break apart this piece of my number line into 3 pieces. So there would be a piece, there would be a second piece, and here would be a third piece. So each one of these would represent a 1/3 piece on my number line. So that would be 1/3. And my next piece would be 2/3. And my last piece would be 1/2 or 3/3. So we could actually represent 1/2 as a fraction called thirds. In our next part, we're going to reuse our skills of rounding. So 41 is between 40, because we're rounding to this is 10. 41 would round to 40, because it's not past 45 in between 40 and 50. 129 is going to be between 120, or it's going to round to 130. Now, 129 is only 1 away from 130, but it's 9 away from 120. So we definitely know that it's going to be closer to 130. Now, keyword being here about, I know that when I add 40 to this 30, I end up with 70. And I still have this 100 here, so that would be 170. Our next problem tells us, in 1 hour, Miranda hiked 342 feet. In another 2 hours, Miranda hiked 512 feet. If the mountain is 1,000 feet high, how many more, that's a clue, those are a clue phrase, how many more feet does Miranda have to hike? So if I were going to visualize this, Miranda's going on a hike. And on this trail, she starts here and she goes 312 feet. Then she hikes some more, and then she hikes for another 512 feet. It says that her total distance is going to be the total mountain, which means that she's going to have to travel some more. But by the time she reaches the end, she will have hiked 1,000 feet. So we know part of her hike, that she hiked here for 342 feet. She hiked here for 512. Now, if I just look at 300 plus 500, she's traveled about 800 feet. So we know that she hasn't reached her 1,000 because we can just get an idea and be reasonable about how far she's traveled so far. So now we need to think, okay, well, we need to find this missing part. So when we think about, we know the whole, and we know 2 of the parts, but we're missing a 3rd part. So if we get the idea, or remember that if we know our whole, we take out the parts that we do know to find out what's left. So in this case, you could do one of 2 things. You could take the 2 parts that you know and subtract it from your whole, which is your 1,000 feet. To figure out what's going to be left. If you do that, let's take those 2 parts that you know And let's add them together. So 500 plus 300 is 800. 40 plus 10 is 50. And 2 plus 2 is 4. So far, from here to there, she has traveled 854 feet, which is not 1,000. So that tells us we need to subtract to find what's different, our difference between here to here. So now, if we take the 854 feet that she's traveled up to this point, away from the 1,000 feet that she's going to have, then we can find what's going to be left, our difference. Our difference. So, let's start with subtracting 1,000 minus the 800. So think of 1,000 as 10 hundredths. And we're going to subtract from those 10 hundredths 8 of those hundredths. So if I take 1,000 and I subtract 800, I get a difference of 2 hundredths, because 800 plus 200 is going to give me 1,000. Check your subtraction by using addition. Then I could subtract my tens place, which would be 50. And if I take 200 and I subtract 50, I'm going to have 150. Then if I take this 150 and subtract 4, and I think backwards, 149 is subtracting 1. Subtract 2 would be 148. Subtract 3 would be 147. And subtracting 4 would be 146. So, Miranda has 146 feet left to travel for her hike. Now, this is a model representation of this particular word problem. I'm showing you how to think about it as a whole part. You're subtracting the parts to find your missing part, which is how much she has left to hike. Then we added the parts that we knew so that we could subtract from the whole to find our difference. Now, if you write this as a answer statement, you would say Miranda has 146 feet left to hike because, and then you explain how you used your two parts. So if you happen to do it like this, you would explain that you added your 342 and your 512 together. So you're getting part of your hike, which would be the 842. or excuse me, 854. Sorry, 854. And then you're going to subtract that from your 1,000. So remember to continue to practice writing your word problem answers to answer statements and explaining your thinking when you are working out your word problems. That's it for today on week 5, day 1. We will go over our solutions tomorrow for week 5, day 2. Remember, check those solutions. Have a great day.